In this video, we will be discussing this particular chapter called The Address, which is written by Marga Minco. This is set in the Second World War times. Okay, just after the Second World War, but in the flashback, you're talking also about the time when the Second World War was being waged in the political theater of Europe in particular. And this is a story of a family, or let's say two families, and how they are caught in the crossfire and that whole flux of human emotions, of a sense of belonging कि जो मेरा है, कि क्या वो कई साल बाद जब आप उसी चीज को, when you see the same thing in a different alien strange kind of a place, do you still feel that it is the same? Right? You grow up studying on a particular table, right? For many years, say 10 years, you've studied. You are aware of how the table feels, about the shape. Even if you touch the legs of the table, you'll know exactly kahan pe wo crack hai, kahan pe kuch scribble kiya tha, everything. You sell the table. OLX mein bech do. Okay. After many years, you see the same table at someone else's house. How would you feel? कि मेरा है, but then it will be in a different kind of surrounding. The setup will be different. Maybe they would have done something to the table. Maybe they would have painted the table differently, right? आपका brown color का रहा होगा, उसको black color कर दिया होगा. Would you feel the same kind of emotional connect with the table? That's a question you need to answer, right? This is the essence of this particular story. So let's get started. Okay, I hope you can see the PDF on your screen, The Address by Marga Minco. The interesting thing is that, जैसे होता है ना, typing error by some clerk, similar thing happened with this particular author, because the real name of Marga Minco is Sarah Minco. Okay, she's a Dutch journalist and writer, and her real surname is Menco, as in M-E-N-C-O. Lekin, one official at some point of time in her life typed one vowel wrong. Instead of E, he typed I, and it became Minco. She was born in 1920 and she went into hiding during the Second World War in 1942. That's why many of her stories that she has written often revolve around the problems faced by war survivors. Okay, what is the historical context to this particular story? ये आपको जानना जरूरी होगा, because during the Second World War, okay, and you would have read this in class 10 in your history books, in May 1940, Germany under Adolf Hitler attacked Holland, where 90% of the population was Jewish, and Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party had a thing against the Jews, right? So many of the Jews fled to other countries from Holland, okay, and thousands were imprisoned in concentration camps in Holland itself, right? So that is the historical context of this particular story, जिसको जानना आपके लिए जरूरी है. And about the story itself, now it is a war fiction story about a family which is lost in the hatred of the Second World War, this entire anti-Jew kind of sentiment. And the story is set immediately after the end of the World War in 1945. And the narrator is a young girl, okay, who has survived the war, the Second World War, but all her family members have died. Okay, so she lives in a small hut-like room with no facilities, and it's pretty close to the station, but all she remembers is one address. एक एड्रेस जो उसकी माँ ने बताया था वो उसको याद है, एंड उस एड्रेस की सर्च में वो निकल पड़ती है. ओके, she knows exactly what was the furniture that the family owned, what was the kind of luggage, what were the kind of items that they owned, including the cutlery. Okay, so that's what the story is. So story ko padhte hain. So this short story is a poignant means something very emotional account of a daughter who goes in search of her mother's belongings after the Second World War in Holland. Okay, when she finds the belongings, the objects, that is the furniture, the cutlery, the entire belongings, evoke memories. They bring back memories of her earlier life. However, she decides to leave them all behind and resolves to move on. Move on matlab कि छोड़ दो, this is the past. I'm not going to have worry about it. Now I'm going to look and build my own life in the future. Okay. Do you still know me? I asked. The woman looked at me searchingly. ऊपर से नीचे. She's kind of looking at her, peering at her. She had opened the door a chink, that is just a little space. I came closer and stood on the step. So you just imagine that particular thing, the way it is in European countries, a house, a room, a house kind of a thing, an independent house. And she climbed one more step. No, I don't know you. I am Mrs. S's daughter. So the mother's name is put as S. She held her hand on the door as though she wanted to prevent it from opening any further. Her face gave absolutely no sign of recognition. She kept staring at me in silence. So the woman who has opened the door to this young girl does not, two things she's doing. She's looking at her and pretending that she has not recognized her. Number two, she's not opening the door too much so that she does not come in or she does not get to see inside. Perhaps I was mistaken. I thought perhaps it isn't her. I had seen her only once, fleetingly. Fleetingly means just for a moment. And that was years ago. It was most probable that I had rung the wrong bell. That is, she may have got the address wrong. She may not have remembered the correct address. The woman let go of the door and stepped to the side. She was wearing my mother's green knitted cardigan, the sweater. The wooden buttons were rather pale from washing. That means she must have been used it over and over again. She saw that I was looking at the cardigan and half hid herself again behind the door. So you can imagine, see how beautifully she has described it. You can almost imagine the way this particular scene would have played out. But I knew now that I was right. Well, you knew my mother, I asked. Have you come back? Said the woman. I thought that no one had come back. Means I had thought everyone had died in the war. Only me. That means the rest of my family is now dead. A door opened and closed in the passage behind her. A musty smell emerged. Musty is when, when there is no sunlight coming into the room. You see, in some ghar, I mean, my maternal grandmother's house had a room like that right on top. You had to go, there was a very weird kind of staircase. You had to open like this and you opened onto the floor. And then nobody went into the room. It had no ventilation. It was like one storeroom kind of thing of old things. So when you went inside, you will find a musty kind of smell because it had no ventilation, no sunlight coming. So it had that sense of dampness, right? A musty smell emerged. I regret I cannot do anything for you. I have come here specially on the train. I wanted to talk to you for a moment. So the girl reveals that she has come on the train specifically to meet her at this address. It is not convenient for me now, said the woman. I can't see you another time. So, fir kabhi aana kind of thing. She nodded and cautiously closed the door as though no one inside the house should be disturbed. I stood where I was on the step. The curtain in front of the bay window moved as though someone is seeing from inside. Someone stared at me and would then have asked what I wanted. Oh, nothing. The woman, I would have said it was nothing. As though there is someone inside who is asking the woman, Kaun aaya tha bhai? What did she want? And the woman would have said, oh, no, nothing kind of thing, and just brushed it aside. That's the conversation she imagines would have taken place inside the house after she left. I looked at the nameplate again. Dawdling, it said in black letters on white enamel. And on the jamb, a bit higher, the number. Jamb again is on the number plate, number 46. Okay, so the name of the lady is Mrs. Dawdling, right? Have you come back? I thought that no one had come back. This line shows that even the lady does realize who the narrator is. She recognizes the girl, right? Because she has also seen her once. The narrator realizes that she's unwelcome in that house. There is another person inside, but Mrs. Dawdling is not willing to let the narrator of the story inside the house. So the narrator returns home empty-handed and frustrated. Okay. As I walked back slowly to the station, I thought about my mother who had given me the address years ago. It had been in the first half of the war, that is 1939 to 1942. I was home for a few days, sorry, and it struck me immediately that something or other about the rooms had changed. I missed various things, that is, something was going missing from the house. My mother was surprised I should have noticed so quickly. That is, mother is surprised कि अरे तुमको पता चल गया कि ये missing है. Then she told me about Mrs. Darling. I had never heard of her, but apparently she was an old acquaintance. That is someone you know not very well. You're not a friend, but you're an acquaintance. You know the person, right? Whom she had not seen for years. She had suddenly turned up and renewed their contact. That is, renewed the association. Arey main janti hu. You meet someone after many years. He or she may not be a close friend, but you're an acquaintance in the sense you know about them. You know a bit about their family. You know a bit about what they do. Since then, she had come regularly. Every time she leaves here, she takes something home with her, said my mother. She took all the table silver in one go. So silver, which was there in the house, which was being used as cutlery. And then the antique plates that hung there. She had trouble lugging those large vases, vases. Lugging means to carry a heavy load. and I'm worried she has got a crick in her back from the crockery. That is, she has kind of hurt herself because of carrying that heavy load of crockery. My mother shook. So that shows kitna kuch leke gayi hogi, that she has taken a lot of stuff from their house. My mother shook her head pityingly. But her mother, you realize that she's a very innocent kind of person. She's not bothered about sending away a lot of her stuff into another person's house who is not a friend but an acquaintance who has again established contact only recently. But she's more worried about the fact that she has hurt herself as a result of having to carry that huge luggage. If we had to leave here, we shall lose everything, she says. That agar yahan pe reh gaya, so that woman has put the fear of losing everything because they're in the middle of the war. So she says, agar yahan rahega, to everything somebody will loot and take it away. Let me keep it in my house for safekeeping. After the war, you can come back, take it. That seems to be the arrangement. Have you agreed with her that she should keep everything? I asked. As if that's necessary, my mother cried. It should simply be an insult to talk like that. Can I ask her that, she could keep everything? And think about the risk she's running each time she goes out of her door with a full suitcase or bag. So the mother sees everything from a very different kind of perspective. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. The daughter is not happy about it. She's not convinced about what her mother is saying. She looked at me reprovingly. Reprovingly means something which she does not approve of. Okay. And after that, we spoke no more about it. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station without having paid much attention to things on the way. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war. Now you're back to the present. But I did not want to go further than was necessary. I did not want to upset myself with the sight of streets and houses full of memories from a precious time. This is in the present. Now, in the train back, I saw Mrs. Dorling in front of me again as I had for the first time I met her. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about it. Now you're again moving to the past. So very seamlessly, train, station, she's kind of mixing it up. Present and again going back to the past. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Dorling in front of me again as I had the first time I met her. So she's seeing it for the second time. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. I had got a plate and coming downstairs, I saw my mother about to see someone out, a woman with a broad back. There is my daughter, said my mother. She beckoned to me, that is indicating to her. The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore a brown coat and a shapeless hat. You may be asked about the physical appearance and what she wore, so please mark these lines. Does she live far away? I asked, seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with a heavy case. In Marconi Street, said my mother, number 46. Remember that. Now, why does the mother tell her about the address? Because the mother does believe that at some point in time, after the World War has ended, her daughter would be able to go and pick up all their belongings from Mrs. Dorling's house, which is why she says, remember that. Okay. I had remembered it, but I had waited a long time to go there. Initially, after the liberation, that is the end of the war, I was absolutely not interested in all that stored stuff. Liberation also, the liberation of Holland from the clutches of Germany, which lost in the Second World War. And naturally, I was also rather afraid of it. Okay. Somehow, when you go through a lot of trauma because of the war, afraid of being confronted with things that had belonged to a connection that no longer existed. Why? Because the family was no longer alive, which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes and waiting in vain until they were put back in their place again, which had endured all those years because they were things which belonged to their family. So, she imagined that they would all be there in cupboards and boxes and waiting till they were put back in their normal place, where the cutlery would be used, where a particular furniture will be used. But gradually, everything became more normal again. Bread was getting to be a lighter color. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened. That is, the war had come to an end. A room with a view you were more used to glancing at each day. And one day I noticed I was curious about all the possessions that must still be at that address. So now she thinks that now that things are getting back to normal after the war, let me get back to those things which belong to my family. I wanted to see them, touch, remember. Because remember is an important word. Remember the address, remember the furniture, because there is memory associated. When you see, like for instance, of course, you're all 16, 17-year-olds. Say, let's fast forward. So say 30 years ahead, when you are about 47 kind of thing. And then you go back to your house where you grew up in. There would be memory. Oh, that was the sofa I sat on. That used to be my study table. This used to be the room where I studied. In case if you move out, right, which eventually all of us do move out, move cities, move towns, move countries, etc. Right. So when you go back, you kind of there are memories associated, and that's what she is talking about. After my first train visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, I decided to try a second time because the first visit has been a failure. Now a girl of about 15 opened the door to me. I asked her if her mother was at home. Now she may have been the person who may have opened through the bay window the first time. Remember? No, she said, my mother is doing an errand. Errand means a small kind of job, something which is you kind of, I'll just go through the looking at the, yeah. So errand is some kind of a small job. No matter, said, I will wait for her. I followed the girl along the passage. An old-fashioned iron Hanukkah's candle holder hung next to a mirror. We never used it because it was much more cumbersome than a single candlestick. So candle holder is where there are lots of candles can be put on the candle holder. Okay, and it is used in the Hebrew festival in December. It's in the Feast of Lights. Won't you sit down? Sorry. Asked the girl. She held open the door of the living room and I went inside past her. I stopped, horrified. I was in a room I knew and did not know. Now, this is important. I was in a room I knew. Knew means because it was full of belongings and furniture that belonged to their family. Did not know because it was now in an alien kind of a place. It was not in their home. It was in someone else's home. So it kind of seemed like stranger, like an alien. I found myself in the midst of things I did want to see again, but which oppressed me in the strange atmosphere. The atmosphere was very strange. They were all, it belonged to me, but they were in a different kind of a place, or because of the tasteless way everything was arranged. So if you get a question as to why the narrator feels strange, that she knows and does not know, you need to mention these 2 points. Or perhaps it was the tasteless meaning because there is no proper aesthetic kind of arrangement to that particular furniture, because of the ugly furniture or the muggy smell. Muggy means the same, the musty smell which I talked about earlier. I don't know, but I scarcely dared to look around me. The girl moved a chair. I sat down and stared at the woolen tablecloth. I rubbed it. My fingers grew warm from rubbing. I followed the lines of the pattern. Somewhere on the edge, there should be a burn mark that had never been repaired. So she's able to remember even the scratches and the burn marks on that particular table. Okay, she's able to, because pata hota hai, how does the texture of any piece of furniture in your room, even when we are blindfold, and if you go around the thing, if you touch piece of furniture, you will know what is, right? It's the same kind of thing. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of awareness. You are aware of what each thing smells, tastes, and feels like. My mother will be back soon, said the girl. I have already made tea for her. Will you have a cup? Thank you. I looked up. The girl put cups ready on the tea table. She had a broad bag just like her mother. She poured tea from a white pot. All it had was a gold border on the lid. I remembered. Again, she's able to remember a lot of things. She opened a box and took some spoons out. That's a nice box. I heard my own voice, It was a strange voice, because she's kind of pointing out to things which belong to her, but she's not feeling comfortable with that kind of an interrogation of sorts, or making statements that, मैं पहचानती हूँ इस box को, as though each sound was different in this room. She was not feeling at home, in the sense that, when you are surrounded by things which belong to you in your house, there's a sense of belonging, there is a sense of comfort level. But when the same belongings are kept in another room which does not belong to you, in another house, in another building, then there is a sense of ki mera hai, but I'm feeling strange out here, because it's arranged differently, it's arranged in a tasteless manner. So there is something very different about it. I had no need to follow her hand. I knew which things she meant. She said, my mother says it's antique. We have got lots more. She points it out as though the girl is innocent. She doesn't know that these things belong to this girl's family only. So as a child, I'd always fancied the apple on the pewter plate. Okay, we use it for everything, she said. Once we even ate off the plates hanging there on the wall. I wanted to so much, but it wasn't anything special. I had found the burn mark on the tablecloth. The girl looked questioningly at me. Yes, you get so used to touching all these lovely things in the house, you hardly look at them anymore. So the narrator is saying, you only notice when something is missing because it has to be repaired or because you have lent it, for example. Lent it means because that was what it was meant to be. They had lent it to this Mrs. Darling to keep it for a certain period of time, not for this new family to claim ownership of it. Understood? Again, I heard the unnatural sound of my voice and I went on. I remember my mother once asked me if I would help her polish the silver. So the narrator is going in flashback, right? It was a very long time ago and I was probably bored that day, or perhaps I had to stay at home because I was ill. As she had never asked me before, I asked her which silver she meant, and she replied, surprised, that it was the spoons, forks, and knives, of course. And that was a strange thing. I did not know the cutlery we ate off every day was silver. You see, I mean, she says, when it is at home, we never realize that what each item was. But now she's kind of realizing it as she's able to see everything, right? So she's also saying that, we never realize the value of what it was when it was at home, because we think, yes, sab hamara hi hai, kind of a thing. The girl laughed again. I bet you don't know it is either. I looked intently. I'm sure even you don't know it. What we eat with? Well, do you know? She hesitated. She walked to the sideboard and wanted to open a drawer. I looked, I will look, it is in here. I jumped up. I was forgetting the time. I must catch the train. So by now, the narrator is feeling very uncomfortable. She doesn't want to be, because this is bringing back too many memories from the past, and she feels extremely uncomfortable by that whole thought. As I walked down the passage, I heard the jingling of spoons and forks. She was used to the sound. She knew everything, the feel, everything, right? At the corner of the road, I looked up at the nameplate. Marconi Street, it said. I had been at number 46. The address was correct. But now I did not want to remember it anymore. I wouldn't go back there because the objects that are linked in your memory with the familiar lives of former times instantly lose their value when severed from them, when separated from them. You get to see them in strange surroundings. This is the operative part. So if you feel that if you're asked a question about why did the narrator leave behind all the objects, ये पैराग्राफ में से आपको कोट करना है. Okay, they instantly lose their value when severed from them, that is separated from them. You see them in strange surroundings. And what should I have done with them in a small? Now she's living in a small rented house, which is much smaller than this house, even though it has a musty smell, where the shreds of blackout paper still hung along the windows. Why blackout paper? Because when the war happens, what they do is that so that the lights don't show inside for the aircrafts which are going to bomb. Because if they see a lot of lights, they will just drop bombs to kill human beings. So you put black paper during war times on the window so that the light inside does not show outside. And no more than a handful of cutlery fitted in the narrow table drawer. I resolved to forget the address. Of all the things I had to forget, that would be the easiest. So she says she no longer wants to remember the address. And this is an important question. I'll just go through the question thing. Why did the narrator want to forget the address or want to go back? Because the objects that were linked to them in her memory with her earlier life, that is with her family, had lost their value as they were now in strange surroundings. Another reason was that in the small rented room where she lived right now, she had no place to keep all of that. So she wanted to forget the address, and she does believe that, it would also be easy to do so. Okay, one more thing. Why did the narrator want to forget the address finally? What I just now said, that the objects were now part of someone else's life. She found that the same things which she used to love earlier had lost their beauty and charm in an alien, strange kind of a surrounding. And she also found that Mrs. Darling and her daughter were using their things as their own. It had become theirs. She no longer found that they were belonging to her. She found them in rather strange kind of surroundings. So with that, we come to the end of the address. I hope it is clear. Please go through the question and answers, right? And it will make it very clear as to what you need to write in question and answers that you get, questions that you get from this particular chapter. Thank you very much for watching. All the best. Achhe bane raho. Bye bye.